We're back at the table with this week's Line Opinion panelists. In the past week, a big story in the news was that a group of Native American actors walked off the set of an Adam Sandler movie here in New Mexico. Those actors said the jokes were offensive and the clothing was inaccurate, amongst many other things, despite the fact that the film had hired a cultural advisor. In fact, the cultural advisor himself walked off too. And Rob, you know, it's interesting. Let's kind of get this straight here. Some Native actors stayed, some left. It wasn't a mass walkout, but those who did leave had a lot of support, and they also had a lot of folks not supporting them too. How did it strike you, given what the circumstances were that caused the walkout?
If you're offended by something and you don't want to take part in it, then more power to you. You can walk off. But if you're not, then you can stay. There's a gentleman by the name of Ricardo Cate who draws a cartoon called Without Reservations in the Santa Fe New Mexican.
Yeah.
He's on the film. He's decided to stay. I mean, this is an Adam Sandler film. And Adam Sandler's not exactly highbrow, but in defense of Mr. Sandler, I mean, if you take a look at a lot of comedic movies these days, Bridesmaids, which had projectile vomiting and defecation as a big joke, a lot of Judd Apatow movies, and he's considered a very hot director. I mean, we're not talking about Myrna Loy and the Thin Man here.
You know what I have to ask you, though? You're right. There's a lot of lowbrow humor out there that makes a lot of dough, but it does not involve making fun of someone's culture. Those examples you just laid out here.
Right, but
they don't.
First of all, we haven't seen the movie, so if he could be an equal opportunity insulter in this situation, and the example's been brought up about Blazing Saddles. I mean, in Blazing Saddles, Mel Brooks has a cameo appearance as an Indian where he's talking about the darkness of his skin. So if it's almost sort of like the Charlie Hebdo situation, you know? I mean, you draw a cartoon that might be offensive to some people, but that's what you get in a free society.
I just so disagree. First of all, Blazing Saddles, 30 years ago?
At least.
Have we not made any progress?
Yeah.
Are we not creative enough to make comedy without insulting people's culture, their very being, which is why these people walked off?
That's right.
And I just think they're taking the cheap way out with this film. If you look at who's starring, it's 5 white guys. Come on. So they're using the Native Americans as props, literally as props.
Right.
I think, okay.
And who's going to
it's not
profit from
against the law.
that?
I hear your point, Martha, and if someone's offended by it, who knows? If I go see the movie, I might be offended by it as well. The question I've got is, what is your prescription? Is the prescription to shut it down? I
No,
don't think
my
so.
prescription is to get more creative. Can't you make comedy, even with cowboys and Indians?
But the market's going to decide that. If
Well,
people don't
you
like it,
can
then they're not gonna
train
go
the
to the
market.
movie.
My God, we train the market every day. We're bombarded with how many 1,500 commercials every 12 hours, something like that. You can train the market.
But this
Come
is.
Laura
sorry.
here, real quick. Sorry, Dan. The idea that have you read some of the script? Has everyone read some of the pages from the script? It was fairly ridiculous, even as lowbrow humor goes. And it almost seemed, Laura, like they were going out of their way to not just make fun of these people, but to use them as some sort of piñata to laugh at in their suffering at the same time.
Well,
what was your sense of it?
Yeah, I think, you know, it is called The Ridiculous Six. I think a lot of Adam Sandler's movies, and I've seen a lot of them. My husband's contract with a studio involves screening a lot of Adam Sandler movies, so I've actually seen a lot of them. And there's always toilet humor.
Sure.
But I think there's a big difference between, you know, the Judd Apatow Bridesmaid, or whoever did Bridesmaids, of projectile vomiting and diarrhea versus, you know, something that's offensive culturally and racially.
That's right.
I see some of the stuff that was in this script as almost like blackface, you know, that kind of
Exactly.
thing, which is really racially offensive at a different level. And I think, you know, I applaud the people who walked off, but I also think that the people who stayed on, you know, there's an economic reason for why they stayed on.
That's right.
And I think we live in very tough times right now, and people need a job. So, you know, sometimes it's not something that they can personally do to walk off and not get paid for a job.
Let me kind of riff on something Rob said that you see out on Facebook a lot, this idea that these folks should have known better because it's an Adam Sandler movie. Should that make a difference in your mind?
I have seen a lot of Adam Sandler movies. And
Yeah.
no, I don't think that this is necessarily expected. I don't think that the racial humor is something that's expected of Adam Sandler. The toilet humor and the tongue-in-cheek, you know, the lowbrow kind of stuff certainly is a part of Adam Sandler stuff. But I don't think that I would say there's a a string of racial issues that are that permeate all of his movies. I think this particular one was offensive, and I think it's important that we take a stand. We're not talking about Blazing Saddles time. That was over 30 years ago. We've come a long way, and I think we have to be more sensitive about, especially in a state like New Mexico, where a film crew like this is getting a tax credit. We need to be more sensitive to our taxpayers and be able to reflect the culture here.
Yep. One of the things that came up, Dan, I'm glad Laura brought up the film office in a roundabout way, the state. Their statement was it's a First Amendment issue. And I felt like our own film office threw our own Native American folks under the bus a little bit. It is a First Amendment issue. No one would ever argue that. But it seems to me there's got to be a way to say, look, you can't just walk in here and make fun of people for money, for profit. Is that a reasonable thing you would expect the state to say?
No, not at all.
Why not?
Because it's not the state's job to decide when you implement the First Amendment, whether you like the First Amendment or not, if you're going to judge the First Amendment. At the end of the day, look, all of this kerfuffle about this whole thing to me is clear. First of all, yes, people should have known. If you haven't watched any Adam Sandler movie,
let me call you down. How should they have known?
You should know the person who's writing the movie. If you watched
He doesn't write racial stuff.
Okay, well, if you watched any of his movies, Waterboy, I don't think the people in Louisiana think they were portrayed in a very nice light by the people in Waterboy. I think if you look at what they were doing, you look at the fact that it's a comedy, I think, look, this is no different than Cheech and Chong. We can talk about a ton of comedians that get on stage that make movies that are African Americans, Native, that are Hispanic. You go through the number that poke fun at themselves, their own race. What this was is a small group of people decided to make a political point. That's what they're doing. Because
Absolutely, and that's how you make social change.
But this isn't about social change.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't. The
Yes,
social
it
change.
is.
The social change is Martha Burke should not buy a ticket to that movie, and Martha Burke has
There's
the
gotta
right
be
to
a step
stand
before that.
No,
No, there
there's
isn't a
gotta
step
be
before
There's gotta be a
that.
step before
Because
that.
I'm going to tell you, I'll bet you this
Dan, let me
Gene,
ask
I'll
you a
bet you this
question.
movie.
Hang on.
No, hold on.
Hang
Gene,
on,
I'll bet you this
hang on,
movie.
sir,
I'll
hang
bet
on.
this movie makes a ton of makes a ton of money.
Well, that's beside the point. If
not beside the point.
you are offended because a woman from your culture is being made to urinate and smoke a peace pipe at the same time, so people outside of your culture can get a laugh, what is wrong with walking out of that and saying, as a political protest, I do not approve of this?
Nothing's wrong with walking out of it. But Gene, we can't get
It rises
Gene, we
above a
can't-
kerfuffle
Gene, we
at that
can't- No, it
point.
doesn't, because Gene, we can't get our government. We can't get our government to take a stance of people hacking off other people's heads on YouTube, and we're just going to say it's because they don't have a job. They don't have a job. But now you're going to say that because we have a Native American lady smoking a peace pipe, that the world is coming to an end. I think, my friend, you are proving my point. Our priorities are so far out of whack in this country that we would rather be angry at Adam Sandler than we would the people leading this country saying that the reason people are getting their heads cut off is they don't have a job.
We're not
Absolutely
going to
crazy.
ISIS. We're staying close to home.
I know, because
Yeah.
it doesn't
Please.
fit your monologue.
What the state could do
Please.
is say, you can make whatever movie you want. We're not going to underwrite this sort of thing with our tax dollars.
But where do you draw the line, Martha?
Right.
Well, all right.
I mean, you say, okay,
let
well,
me
this-
give you an
When they had the
example.
Virgin Mary
this
stuff,
is
that was
Here-
Here's my
floating in
question.
urine, that was
To answer your
okay.
question, Rob,
Suppose
why
this
isn't it
was-
good enough if a Native American says, I am offended? Why does others have to weigh in and say, no, you shouldn't be offended?
No, that's exactly
Because
right.
other Native Americans were not
what if
offended
this
and
were a
stayed on the
Holocaust? What
film.
if this film were making fun of the Holocaust, or it was glamorizing slavery? Now you
like
say,
Springtime for
where
Hitler.
do you draw the
They've made
line?
those
Use Mel
movies.
Brooks.
That,
yeah,
all right,
use-
that
use
is
Mel Brooks
public
again.
money, though. What I'm saying is they can go ahead and make it, but we as taxpayers, as people who have public values,
So are we
do
going to have
not have
so are we
to
going to have
underwrite.
are we
We're
going
gonna
to
have a
have
moral
are we going to have a
clause at the film
referendum every time since we have a
We can
system
have
that,
broad
by the way, I
guidelines
disagree
of
with
what
where,
is
okay,
society, what
subsidize
society
these
generally
films.
But how about at the end of the day, Gene? We're talking about this money being subsidized by the taxpayer, but then you've got life issues out there that the government's subsidizing, that the Catholic Church is they're offended with, but we don't want to talk about that.
I
Gene.
hear you, but
No,
here's the
Gene,
problem.
Gene, the problem is
we
is
keep
that you-
walking away from the issue. The issue here was a very specific set of our citizenry. Had a
Some
purpose.
are
very
That's fine.
important.
It doesn't have to. It
But a
doesn't.
very important
They
part
don't
said they were
want to
okay
stay
with
But
it.
before
nothing
any
starts
of us
with an
got
all
here.
in. Sometimes it starts, as Martha said, by a few. And there was an interesting article by the fellow that was the Native American consultant and why I left
I read
the
that.
show. It was a very interesting piece to me. He made the point that some of these other younger guys were hungry. They want to make some money. They want to be in the
They didn't
movies.
have
We can't
the
They didn't
assume
have a
history.
history. They're younger, and so they stayed. It's
We can't
complicated why
assume
one
that
stays and
just
goes.
because they stayed that they weren't offended.
That's right.
I mean, there's
I agree.
financial reasons. There's a lot of other reasons why they would say, and you can't just say that only the people who are Native American were offended. Many other people were offended.
Absolutely.
Some of the things that were said against women in there are offensive to women. I was offended by some of the stuff that was said. in
Right.
there.
But where
and I
do you
think there's
draw
a
the
very
line, though?
specific target
Where do you
audience
draw
for
the
this.
line?
You draw the line where those folks who are the aggrieved say the line has been drawn. That's the line.
And that
Across
line-
the
and
line.
And none of us have any
but in
say in
that-
it after
but there's
that.
not a
in this
consensus
country-
even among the
but
Native
Gene, in this
Americans who
country,
are there
that
on the-
line-
on the
That's their
set.
internal
But Gene, in
fight.
this
We
country,
can't
the
walk
line-
into it.
But Gene, in this country, the line, in my opinion, is drawn by the ticket sales. It's not
See,
drawn
you-
by
well,
somebody.
you want
Actually, in my opinion, the
hypocrisy.
line is drawn by
It's
people
not-
like you.
It's not drawn by somebody in Santa Fe sitting in a building saying, "I like that movie. I don't like that
Dan,
movie."
the bottom line does not control public values. Come on.
Well, we know
You're
that because
trying
we
to
spend a
say,
lot of
let's
money on
let
a lot
the
of
movie
bad things.
corporations decide what
No,
makes
they-
the most
And the other
money,
thing-
and therefore
But that's
we
how it
don't care
works.
how
And we don't want,
offensive
but we
it
don't
is.
want the state determining.
do you want the government
The
making
public-
Hang on,
There are
the
public
state does
values.
have criteria about what they will
Absolutely.
put money into on a film. They have criteria. It is actually part of the
do.
deal.
There's a big rule
There's a
along with
whole
it.
list of things.
And
they
is this
will
in the
not put money
criteria?
into- It is not.
Maybe it should
and
be.
maybe it should be.
Maybe
That
it
is
should
part of the
be.
question.
And that's
the
part of the
conversation.
problem. Part of the problem is, Dan's talking about how the bottom line should be drawn by the ticket sales. The
Right.
bottom line in this country has traditionally been drawn by people like Dan, white males, and that's who the target audience
Thank
is
you.
for this particular movie,
So
and
if
that's
you-
who's
and that's-
making this
that's who's
particular
gonna
movie.
make all the money from this
So,
movie.
we have
So
to,
if you
at
make
some
so if you
point-
make a movie that appeals to female people of color that
No,
might
I'm just
insult,
saying there needs
insult
to be more
white males, and that's
inclusiveness.
okay.
No, I'm saying there needs to be more
There's
inclusiveness
not
and
one
recognition
female
about
star
culture.
in this movie. There's not one female
There's
principal.
plenty of movies out there that don't have any straight white males in it, and you know what? They make money. I mean, this is.
They're the studio execs making the money.
I know it's a constant barrage that you love to hate the white guy, and I'm telling you what.
I
we
love
right
white
now,
guys.
We
I
are the
do too.
most.
I'm married to one.
We're the
I'm
most.
married to a white guy.
As a matter, you guys haven't gotten the memo. We are the minority right now. The straight heterosexual white male is a minority
And you
in this
are
state
so
in this country.
persecuted. God,
I'm just
I
telling
feel
you,
sorry
it's
for
we are
you,
the
man.
minority. I
On
know.
that note, on that note, up next we get an update on how the state is preparing for this year's wildfire season.